So, welcome everyone. I'm Alexander Mihalja, and today we have one of the industry leaders, Lise Pape, founder of Walk with Path Limited. Welcome, Lisa. How are you doing today?
Hello, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very well. How are you?
I'm good, thanks for asking, and I'm excited to have you on the podcast today, and I'm sure you're going to be of great value for the audience. Now, before we dive in, could you give us a quick overview of what Walk with Limited does?
Yeah, Walk with Path is working on solutions for everyday life to help with mobility challenges that people may face. We started working on this because my father suffered from Parkinson's disease. So, within that context, I saw how debilitating that can be for everyday life and sort of quite basic challenges that you can face. And then set out on this journey to try and impact lives for different populations. We now focus mostly on diabetes and helping to solve challenges there.
Okay, that's really fascinating. And what inspired you to create Walk with Path Limited? Was there a specific moment or experience that sparked this journey?
Yeah, it was a combination of things. When I started working on the sort of concepts that then later developed into the sort of products we're working on today, I was in an innovation ecosystem. I was a student at Imperial College and the Royal College of Art in London in innovation design engineering. So that gave me the sort of framework to try and work on new solutions. Of course, my personal experience with my father suffering from Parkinson's disease was a big factor for choosing to work on mobility specifically. But also, my background before this degree was in human biology. I was always naturally interested in sort of medical sciences. And so the combination of those three factors really was the initial starting point for wanting to seek out solutions with no side effects to help with daily life challenges.
Okay, interesting one. And for example, looking back, what would you wish you've done differently in those early days when you're starting this venture?
But that's a tough one. You make so many choices all the time. Um, in the very early days, it was just me, and that can be a bit lonely. And then my colleague Florian joined me quite early on, maybe 9 months, 12 months in. In some sense, it would have been great to have someone like Florian from the start,
Yeah,
because you do make a lot of decisions, and it's really nice to have a co-founder to share that with and to sort of debate that with. So I'm really pleased that he joined me not too long in, but yeah, I think to other people who are looking to start businesses, it's really a big advantage to have other people that are equally in this with you from the very start.
of course. Yeah. But for example, could you explain how your Parkinson's device provides a cueing effect to stimulate walking abilities?
Yeah, so our Parkinson's device is called Pathfinder, and it's a shoe attachment that sits on the outside of the footwear of the wearer. In Parkinson's, there's a symptom called freezing of gait, which is quite common, and it's the contributor of many falls for people with Parkinson's. It basically means that somebody feels stuck to the ground, unable to continue with walking. It's been quite well established that you can break that symptom by means of using visual cues, so essentially lines on the ground or on the floor. And our device provides that in a flexible, mobile manner because it's providing it from the footwear. So if you imagine that you're stepping forward with your right foot, a cue is provided from your left foot. So your left foot or the front of it will shine a green line on the ground in front of the right foot. Then the right foot steps over that, and the moment that lands on the ground, that will then project the green line to sort of trigger for the left foot to move and step over that line. So the line is sort of constantly with you as a person, and you can use it in your home or when you go shopping at the supermarket or whatever you want to do. Whereas other prior solutions to solve this with queuing was putting tape on the ground. So some hospitals still have that tape on the ground, but obviously that's not mobile. Yeah.
Right. Interesting one. And what led to the strategic pivot from the Parkinson's device to the insole technology for diabetes?
Yeah. So both the insole and the Parkinson's device were sort of concepts from my student days. So they were both there in the early days, as very early prototypes. In 2019, however, we decided to focus on the insole product for a couple of reasons. A, the insole product is targeting a much wider population. Of course, it can be used for people with diabetes, but it could also be used by people with Parkinson's and others with movement challenges like multiple sclerosis, even people who are going through stroke rehabilitation. So there are multiple opportunities for the insole technology in various ways. Also, we can see that with the insole technology, we can do very good gait analysis, so analysis of how somebody walks. And in fact, walking is demonstrated to be a vital sign of health. So walking can
Yeah.
say a lot about how well we are doing. It can help detect different kinds of conditions, like early signs of dementia gets expressed in how we walk, but also things like depression can be expressed in how we walk. So walking is almost like a minefield of opportunity for sort of human health analysis ongoing. It can help also to see whether somebody is at risk of falling, which can be extremely relevant to the aging population, where we know every third person over 65 is likely to have a fall once a year. It's a big number, and there's huge consequences to events like that. So if we can have a role in preventing that, we'd very much like to do that. So this was part of the considerations for moving into the insole. And then, of course, on another practical level, it matters a lot if healthcare systems will pay for our solution. That will drive uptake and scaling out, and therefore also the impact of it. And we have confirmed with our insole technology that the U.S. Medicare can cover that. So that's a huge thing, because the U.S. is a big healthcare market, and if it can cover it, it means we can reach many more people who can benefit. And that's not the same for the Pathfinder for Parkinson's. Of course, that offers something else. We have clinical evidence showing it works, but it's not getting coverage in some of the biggest healthcare markets, and that's a big differentiating factor. That means it can be more favorable for us to work on the insole tech.
And for example, how are you using technology to prevent diabetic for foot ulcers?
So the insoles can help with preventing foot ulcers because it continuously checks some of the foot health parameters. So we check things like pressure, and we know that an excess pressure between the foot and the ground could cause tissue damage, essentially. And what's important here as well is that people with diabetes often can't feel their feet. So they have a symptom called neuropathy, which is a sensory loss. So if you can imagine, if you cannot feel your foot properly, you then also cannot feel if you are developing a blister. And for people with diabetes, blisters, they're called ulcers in that group. They can be quite hard to deal with. Ulcers take a very long time to heal, also because there is poor blood flow if you have diabetes. So we check for pressure, we check also for temperature in the feet, because a rise in temperature can show an inflammatory response. So those two parameters are known as kind of biomarkers that could
Yeah.
show that there's a risk of foot ulcers. So we check that continuously. If there is a potential risk, we provide a notification to the wearer's phone in the shape of an alert that comes to the front of the screen. So in that way, it sort of circumvents the lack of feeling that the person has.
Okay, I see. And all of this is very interesting, but could you elaborate on why the existing solutions weren't meeting these needs on every side?
Within the sort of field of diabetic foot ulcers and prevention of that, the way that that's done typically today in terms of standard of care is that people get categorized into low, medium, or high risk of ulcers based on a range of factors like presence of neuropathy, but also whether you've had an ulcer in the past. And based on that categorization, you get scheduled to see a podiatrist, which is a clinician who deals with foot health, every so often. If you are in the high risk category, you could be seen by a podiatrist once a month as a sort of preventative health check. So the podiatrist will then check how your feet look and help you if you have calluses and stuff like that. Um, but what we do see is that there is still a lot of ulcers that occur despite these sort of preventative checks. And in fact, an ulcer can occur in the space of an hour. Some patients
Yeah,
have described getting ulcers really quickly. And so doing the once a month preventative check, it goes some way in terms of helping, but it won't help you on a random Tuesday when you're out walking. You can't feel your feet and you get an ulcer in an hour. That's
right,
where you
right.
need remote monitoring that is continuous and with you throughout your daily life.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And walk us through how Work with Path Limited addresses these challenges. What makes your approach unique?
We don't see that many other sort of remote monitoring solutions out there, and certainly none that have been integrated widely into standard of care. So we do believe that the remote monitoring is actually the way to address this. That continuous monitoring is necessary because ulcers develop so quickly. You need to have the continuous monitoring. A lot of patients describe to us that they have this constant anxiety about getting ulcers, especially if they've had one in the past. They know how difficult it is to deal with. So our approach is unique because it is preventative. A lot of healthcare isn't. That's more like treating once you have an ulcer.
Yeah.
Ours is preventative, it's continuous. We're monitoring you throughout your day.
Okay, interesting. But for example, when you talk to potential clients, what's the biggest misconception they typically have about what you do?
That's a good question. Typical clients are like healthcare systems, like we work with the NHS in the UK, for instance. Here, the challenges can be that the clinicians might feel concerned that not all patients have smartphones, and you need to have that in order to use our tool. That's slowly changing. I think more and more people are indeed using smartphones, also amongst the sort of more aging groups, and I think COVID in a way helped with that, right?
Yeah.
So that is one aspect. Then because our solution has three parts: the insole for the user, the app for the user, and then there's a dashboard for the clinician. Then there is also a need for the clinician to engage with this dashboard, which is literally like a web link that you log into, and you can see if any of your patients had alerts. So there's a need to engage with the dashboard, and that has to be integrated into the workflow of the clinician. So today, they often see patients with face-to-face appointments in the clinic. But here in our context, you have to make sure that you also check dashboards. And I think that seems to be fine so far. There's usually always somebody who's checking the email anyway. So
Yeah.
you centralize that on a given day. But those are some of the things that we need to work through. How exactly does it get adopted into the workflow? And then the next step will be some of these preventative appointments that I mentioned, say once a month. Can some of those actually be cut because now you're being monitored in another way through this insole system, which is continuous, so that you offer appointments on a more needs basis as opposed to calendar basis. So that's the next step we'd like to sort of see if we can also help address, because that would free up time for clinicians to perhaps deal with the people that really need help as opposed to the preventative sort of screening.
Okay, I understand. And for example, what was your first major success story with a client and what changed for them after working with you?
We've had many success stories shared by patients who've been using Pathfinder for Parkinson's. These visual cues that we provide for Parkinson's have been really effective for many patients. And by that, I mean that some of the people with freezing of gait, they have almost gotten used to potentially falling or being unstable. Some patients described that they couldn't engage socially anymore because they couldn't go out of the door or
Yeah.
participate in things. And with this, it gave them a lot of confidence and they could actually participate. So, also, family members described things like, my dad seems much more happy now because he's actually engaging with other people. And so that we must not forget that mobility affects psychosocial health as well. If you can't be mobile and you're used to being mobile, there are so many other things you miss out on. So, in fact, the loneliness aspect comes into play here, and the more we can impact mobility and improvements there, the more we can also impact feelings of happiness and social inclusion, which is super
Yeah.
important. So
Yeah. Yeah.
this is our mission, and I'm fairly confident we'll start seeing the same in diabetes when we get more results back.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Great. And now, looking at the broader industry, what key trends are you seeing emerge?
Of course, there's the big trends towards AI, right? Everyone is talking about AI in healthcare. We're certainly also looking at that and how we can utilize large data sets for our gait algorithms and predictions. So I think that's the overarching trend that is the key one, and it's been around for some time. But I think it's not about to go away.
Okay, interesting. And you mentioned about the US product launch. So how will this transformation will like convert the work with Path Limited?
Yeah, so as a company based in Europe, we've been looking at the different markets to enter, and of course the US is a big one because it's a big healthcare market, but also because we have confirmed that we can get reimbursement in the US market. It makes it incredibly attractive. We've decided to work with a partnership strategy, meaning that we're going to enter the US market together with a partner that already has a reputation in that market and already has access to the clients that we intend to work with, such as the podiatric clinicians. So that is our plan. So we're really excited for the US launch, which is scheduled for next year at the sort of end of Q1. So yeah, that would be very transformative for us because of the size of the market and of course the reimbursement. So we expect to sort of scale quite quickly in the US market.
Okay, that's really interesting. And what's your strategy for scaling behind the pilot production and paid pilots?
So our strategy is partnering with strategic suited partners around the world. We see obviously diabetes is a global problem, ulcers as well. So we see big opportunities in European markets to work with players there as well as in the Middle East, where the diabetes prevalence is greater than it is in Europe and the US. So our plan beyond launch in the US with the partner, the NHS pilots we have right now, which we very much intend to grow as well. Then after that, we plan to grow in other markets, other geographics that can benefit us. But the insoles, as I mentioned, have scope to help other populations as well. So we see big opportunities for our gait monitoring as a tool in various sections. So it could be disease monitoring. In the case of neurological diseases, for instance, you would get a much deeper insight into the individual's performance, perhaps the effects of the treatments they're getting, and the same really in sort of clinical trials. You could imagine using this tool to track the effects of drugs in a clinical trial on specific sort of movement parameters that might be really relevant. So we see a lot of scope beyond this.
Yeah, okay, okay, see. And for example, what are the key milestones in obtaining regulatory approvals like CE marking or FDA registration?
So we have CE marking, UKCA as well, and FDA registration for the initial version of our insole tool for also prevention. So in that sense, we're ready for those markets. The insole does have an extra potential feature, which is a vibratory feedback. So essentially, in the insoles, there are vibration elements that can vibrate to the foot. That brings it into another class of medical device, and so it has other regulatory consequences. So that's not yet regulated. In Europe, it would be a class 2A, in the US, a class 2. So that we do
Yeah.
expect to register as well, but that's slightly with a slightly longer journey. In Europe, you need to work with a notified body, for instance, and with FDA, it's a 510K path.
Okay, I see. And as you're currently raising financing, what are your key messages for the potential investors?
That's right. Yes, we're currently raising a seed round. We have one committed investor already, and we're looking for more investors to join us. The sort of investor we're looking for is ideally somebody who is familiar with the medtech and health tech landscape and interested in impactful businesses. We're looking for investors in Europe or the US, given that we're present in Europe and obviously will be operational in the US in the near future. The sort of things that we're planning to achieve with that funding is the go-to-market launch in the US is the key one, but also some further development of the NHS entries in the UK.
Okay, that sounds very interesting and a lot of things to do in the horizon. And before we wrap, I'm curious about what's on the horizon, but at a large scale. So, when you look at Walk with Path Limited journey over the next few years, what possibilities excite you the most?
I'm really excited by the sort of scaling up for us. At this point, we've spent a lot of time in R&D, getting ready, doing clinical efficacy trials, and right now we're sort of at the cusp of scaling up our operations beyond trials and pilots into sort of real launch. And that is what I see as the most exciting thing for us in the next 2 to 3 years. We need to really grow, and that's why I think the US commercial launch is super critical and very important. And this is where the majority of our focus will be. But then also growing other partnerships for launching in other regions, of course. So, in the sort of next 2 to 3 years, that is where I see the most exciting steps for us.
Okay, interesting curve around. And for listeners who want to learn more or potentially work with Walk with Path Limited, what's the best way to get in touch?
People can get in touch with me via the website or via my email. It's Lisa with an E, not an A, at walkwithpath.com. And yeah, we absolutely welcome collaborations with companies and academics. And of course, if there are investors who are interested in a discussion, I would very much welcome that too.
Great, perfect. So thank you for joining me today, Lisa, and for this amazing podcast session. And for anyone listening, make sure to check out Walk with Path Limited socials below in the description, because this episode was packed with value, and I can wait to see what you build next.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you, and see you in the next episode.